absolutely the best person that I've ever known. Never took a drink in his life, but he was not a do-gooder or anything like that. I never heard him say a word about a person in life. He was so well liked. Well, he was elected county treasurer in Clearfield County. He died while he was in office. He had the largest funeral ever in Clearfield County. Now, Hotsdale's a little place with about 900, maybe 1,000 people, somewhere in there. When he died, there were almost 2,000 people at his funeral. He was a great Mason. He was a 32nd degree Mason. And I remember
But you said he had been a 33rd.
he was supposed to, he was in the process.
Oh, okay. I knew there was something.
Yeah, they were going to make him, because in the process, it must have been in the process, because the national head and the state head of the Masons came to his funeral. Now, Hotsdale was a bad place to get into in those days. I mean, you had to go to...
You had to really want to go there.
You had to want to go, because if you, of course, cars were a rarity. Not exactly, not rarity, but there weren't very many, and the roads were terrible. If you wanted to get into Hotsdale, you took the Pennsylvania Railroad up to Tyrone. From Tyrone, you had to take another train over to Osceola. And then you had to get a train from Osceola up to Hotsdale. all from Tyrone to Hotsdale was probably about, at the most, 30 miles. But it took you usually 2-3 hours to make that trip, because you had to get connections from one thing to the other. So it was probably the greatest thrill, one of the greatest thrills that I ever had up to that time. Was, I can remember, as I said, I was just about 12, 14 years old, but I can remember the funeral, and as I told you last night, one thing that sticks out in my mind, I can see all those Masons. There must have been hundreds of them, really. That may sound like an exaggeration, and maybe I'm looking back and it looks bigger to me. But in my mind, I can still see all those white plumes or plumed hats. And
you said they were like a line. They took the whole block.
Almost a block, yeah. I never saw anything like it in my life. But he was a great person.
Now, you'd indicated last night that he had been treasurer, and then they appointed or elected his wife.
Yeah, no.
No, who was it? It was Gert.
His daughter.
Yeah, his daughter.
When he died, he was so popular with everybody that there wasn't any question at all. A member of his family was going to be appointed treasurer in this place to serve out his term. I think he'd been in about 2 years. And so they appointed Aunt Gert. She served out that term. Now, a treasurer could not succeed himself at that time, a county treasurer. But if you were appointed for a term, see, you weren't elected, so then you could run again. So she finished out that term, and then she ran. And I'm pretty sure of this. She was the first woman in Pennsylvania that was ever elected to a row office.
I'm going to check that out, but I think that's...
I think she was the first one. Gertrude Rumberger, if you're looking up, county treasurer in Clearfield County.
Now, the Rumbergers were Protestant.
Yeah.
They were Presbyterian?
There wasn't, as far as I know, one Catholic in the Rumberger family. All my relations, even back into second, third cousins, stuff like that, there was never one Catholic that I ever knew of.
Now, when we sat down, though, we went through the different generations, and one of the things that struck out was that there were a number of Protestant Catholic marriages, even though that was very unusual.
It was very, very unusual. You know, I've always felt that I came from as far as religion was concerned, I came from the best stock that you could possibly have. In my father's family, my Uncle Jim, who was a lawyer, married a Protestant. Dad, who was a lawyer, married a Protestant. Aunt Alice married Harry Sweeney, who was an undertaker. He was a Protestant. The other three married Catholics, but out of the 6 children, 3 of them married Protestants.
And you married a Protestant?
I married a Protestant. Your Aunt Helen, my sister Helen, married a Protestant. My sister Ida married a Protestant. My sister Betty married a Protestant. And I have never known one even disagreement between people on religion. My grandfather Rumberger, in his family there were two Methodist bishops. But I've always tried to do what he said. I can remember him saying once, "My religion is my business, and it's nobody else's business. Your religion is your business." And no, the way he put it, he said, "My religion is none of your business, and your religion is none. My religion is none of your business, and your religion is none of my business."
And he pretty much lived by that.
He didn't pretty much live by it. He lived by it. See, in those little towns at that time, the fire hall was the center of the town. Everybody was a volunteer fireman. And they used to go down there Friday night. They always had poker games and stuff like that. He was a great hunter. He was an avid fisherman. He ran a big, really for those times, he ran a big hardware store. It was the largest hardware store in that whole region. Well, she was, I guess I must have been a little bit of a smart aleck, you know, because I knew that I could irritate her.
Mm-hmm.
So naturally, when you know that you can irritate somebody when you're about 8 or 9 years old, and they can't do anything about it, and you know it gets their goat, I think most kids have a tendency, well, I'll just rub it in a little bit. So I'd go to Houtsdale and I'd spend the whole summer in Houtsdale. Every day then I'd come down to the hardware store because Pop, that's what we called my grandfather. Anytime I'd go in, I'd always get a nickel, or I'd go in and look at the case where they had the baseballs or the baseball gloves or the bats would be in the racks or something. He'd always give me something, always gave me a nickel, and then I'd go back by there and then I'd look up and he'd say, "Do you need a ball, Andy?" "Yeah, that one I have is all shot." so he'd give me a ball, and it used to irritate Aunt Eve because she knew I was doing it for two reasons. First of all, she knew that I was coming in because I always got something, and secondly, I think she suspected that I was coming in to irritate her. But now, don't get me wrong, Aunt Eve and I
Yeah.
were very, very close.
It was playful
But it was-
irritation.
But when you're a kid, you figure, well, I'll
Yeah.
show her.